In ancient Rome, the term Novus Homo, Latin for new man, designated and denigrated any politician whose family had never before held the consulship. The lack of a prestigious family name to give oneself a leg up often nipped many political ambitions in the bud. As such, only 7 of these new men held the consulship in the 2nd century BC, and any senator worth their salt probably would have laughed in your face had you told them that Gaius Marius would one day be hailed as the 3rd founder of Rome. Born in 157 to a wealthy equestrian family as a Novus Homo, Marius's local community had only received Roman citizenship 3 decades prior, so despite his privileged education and relative wealth, he seemed destined for little greatness in life. Regardless, Marius was imbued with ambition fit for a king, and would one day rise to previously unparalleled heights. For now though, he was just an ordinary citizen, and since Marius had none of the oratory talents that marked someone out for a career in politics, he instead chose the only other path to glory available to him. He joined Scipio Aemilianus' army in Spain. While he served as an officer in the Numidian War, Marius gained a reputation for being a brave and dutiful officer. He was so well respected among his troops that Aemilianus, when asked about who might one day replace him, allegedly tapped Marius on the shoulder and said, "Here perhaps." Once the war in Spain was over, Marius returned home with some Spanish treasure to bankroll his future political campaigns. Even so, he knew that getting anywhere on the political ladder would not be an easy feat, considering the snobbery with which his kind were viewed. Luckily for him, Marius had one good connection, for he was a client of the Metelli family, currently the most powerful single family in Roman politics. Once his requisite military service was up, he stood for election as military tribune and was duly elected, serving one of the Metelli in the Balearic Islands. Subsequently, he ran for and won the quaestorship in 122. He probably served in Gaul during this time as quaestor and witnessed several huge Roman victories. With the support of the Metelli, Marius was elected as tribune of the plebs. So far so good. Marius's career was off to a decent start, and now his position as tribune gave him ample opportunity to get his name out there. Unfortunately for him, Marius would spend his year as tribune politically castrating himself. Prior to his election, the Romans had adopted a secret ballot system for voting. However, patrons, such as the Metelli family, could still get to their clients and twist their arms into voting for them before they had actually deposited their vote. To remedy this, Marius proposed a law that redesigned the stalls so such confrontations were impossible. The consul, Lucius Metellus, tried to have the Senate denounce Marius, but Marius was unfazed and simply threatened to jail the consul should he oppose the vote. The bill was passed, but the Metelli were outraged. He was not exactly a man of the people either, and vetoed a possible grain dole on moral grounds, causing his standing among the plebs to plummet. Marius's career could not withstand 2 shots to the foot, and he was humiliated when he failed to become aedile in 118. It seemed that Marius was doomed to insignificance, but in a surprise turn of events, a crisis in Africa would see Marius stamp his mark on Roman history for the first time. During the Second Punic War, the kingdom of Numidia came over to the Roman side and provided the cavalry that would be key to Hannibal's final defeat. Following Rome's victory, it was allowed to rule vast swathes of North Africa and prospered during the decades that followed. By Marius's time, King Micipsa sat on the throne, and his young illegitimate nephew Jugurtha sat poised to succeed him. Jugurtha was renowned for his vigour and intelligence, and was popular at the royal court, so the childless Micipsa kept him close despite his bastardy, considering whether he should succeed him. But then the childless Micipsa had children, displacing Jugurtha from the royal succession. In the vain hope that he might be killed by a stray javelin, Jugurtha was selected to lead the Numidian contingent that served Aemilianus in Spain, but he did not die to a stray javelin, and won renown among the Romans with his skill, before returning with a letter from Aemilianus commending his bravery. Now that Jugurtha was held in high esteem by the Romans, Micipsa adopted him as his son. Micipsa finally died in 117, and his kingdom was carved up between his biological sons, Adherbal and Hiempsal, and Jugurtha. But Jugurtha promptly assassinated Hiempsal before defeating Adherbal on the field of battle, and Adherbal fled to Rome, hoping for safe treatment. Jugurtha sent envoys to Rome, and both sides began blaming each other for Numidia's ills. Jugurtha made very liberal use of huge bribes to sway many senators to his side, for Numidia was actually a very wealthy and fertile kingdom during this time, and he also benefited from having fought alongside them in Spain. Eventually the Senate sent a 10-man commission to Numidia to sort out the situation, and they ended up dividing the nation in two. Meanwhile, Marius let his ambition push him to run for praetor in 115, and despite his previous failures, Marius won the final praetorship by the skin of his teeth. Accusations of fraud quickly circled, and he was brought to trial, but was acquitted by a tie. Once his term was up, he governed Hispania Caeteria and spent his time clearing bandits from the region, and seemed to have claimed a stake in the lucrative mining businesses of Spain, for when he returned to Rome he had become fabulously wealthy. Despite his slip-ups, Marius had come far, but if he was to claim the consulship he needed respectability and prestige. He was still a Novus Homo after all. To get this prestige he married the 16-year-old Julia Caesarea, aunt of the Julius Caesar. Hailing from the ancient patrician Julii family, her name lent weight to Marius's cause, while Marius provided desperately needed funds to the Julians, who, despite their prestigious name, had fallen on hard times, and were no more than political footnotes by this point. But before the Romans could worry about who their consuls would be, big trouble flared up once again in Little Numidia. Jugurtha tried to bait Adherbal into attacking him with raiding parties, but Adherbal refused and complained to Rome. Unfortunately for him, the Romans could no longer be bothered. He was on his own. Once Jugurtha realised this, he marshalled an army and invaded, forcing Adherbal to hole up in the city of Cirta. Adherbal sent another letter, and this time the Senate sent a 3-man delegation to Numidia, but Jugurtha refused to let them into Cirta to speak with Adherbal, so they left, achieving nothing. Another delegation, headed by Metellus Scaurus, the most influential man in the Senate, arrived later, and finally talks seemed to progress. Seeing Scaurus outside the city, many Italian merchants began to pressure Adherbal to surrender the city, confident that Scaurus would be able to secure safe conduct for everyone inside. Finally yielding to the pressure, Adherbal opened the gates. Jugurtha quickly captured his rival and had him killed before his men stormed the city, pillaging, burning and killing wantonly. Among the slain were those Italian merchants, a grave insult to Rome, and Jugurtha's fatal mistake. No longer able to delay, Rome organised a military force commanded by Consul Bestia to punish Jugurtha for his crimes. Jugurtha tried in vain to bribe the Romans again, but his agents were booted out of Italy. However, when Bestia landed, he and Jugurtha entered talks, and soon they agreed that Jugurtha would pay a small indemnity and then he would be recognised as the sole king of Numidia. The Romans were livid at such a pathetic response, and were equally furious at the senators for accepting bribes. In an attempt to rectify the latter issue, a praetor was sent to bring Jugurtha to Rome, to expose the senators that he had bribed in the first place. The Romans swore a sacred vow that Jugurtha would not be harmed when he came to Rome, and so Jugurtha, seeing an opportunity, obliged. But when the Numidian arrived, he bribed a tribune to veto the proceedings, so instead of rooting out corrupt allies, he spent his time in Rome assassinating various Numidian royal princes who had fled to Rome for protection. Jugurtha left Rome a seething mess, but he was protected by the sacrosanctity of a tribune, so he left unscathed. Shaking with rage, the Romans dispatched several legions across the Mediterranean, but Jugurtha defeated them with trademark skill in 109. That same year, Quintus Caecilius Metellus became consul and began raising fresh troops to finally crush Numidia. While he was raising his army, he asked Marius to serve as one of his legates. Even though he'd got into the Metellus bad books, his skill as an officer was undeniable. Initially, Metellus tried to capture Jugurtha by bribing his envoys to turn Jugurtha over to him. But after this failed, there was a close-fought ambush at the Mathul River, and while Jugurtha sustained heavy casualties, his losses were easily replaced by local Numidian recruits. In order to deny Jugurtha these new recruits, he began the slow and unpopular process of ravaging communities while forcing others to surrender. While it won him no glory, it was winning the war. Jugurtha responded with a guerrilla campaign against Rome, but the toll on his own people was horrific, and his popularity began to wither. Metellus nearly convinced Jugurtha to surrender, but talks broke down and he retreated deep into Numidian lands. Meanwhile, Marius asked Metellus if he could return to Rome and run for the consulship, but Metellus bluntly refused. Undeterred, Marius kept nagging Metellus, but he was shot down time and time again. Metellus likely thought only of capturing Jugurtha, but in refusing Marius he had unwittingly created an even more formidable enemy in his own ranks. Marius began riling up the soldiers against Metellus, while letters went back to Rome that claimed Metellus was purposely dragging his feet. The pressure became unbearable, and Metellus eagerly let Marius leave for Rome. Despite being a Novus Homo, Marius was able to capitalise on a swell of anti-senatorial feelings that had arisen after the blatant corruption of the senators accepting bribes from Jugurtha, therefore using his new man status to his advantage. Furthermore, he opened fire on Metellus, criticising his policies in Numidia, and promising that if he was elected consul, he would defeat Jugurtha within the year. Gaius Marius was elected consul for 107 BC. Soon, Metellus was also replaced with Marius in Numidia, but as he raised more legions to tackle Jugurtha, he was faced with a simple problem. Italy was stretched thin, and eligible recruits were harder to come by than ever before. Marius' solution was a simple one, but it would hasten the death of the Republic and the rise of the Empire. He removed all property requirements for service in the legions. This vastly increased the recruitment pool, but made the legionnaires more loyal to their commander than to Rome itself. Not that Marius had that in mind, of course. All he needed to do was destroy Jugurtha. But as soon as Marius arrived, he quickly realised that ending the war was easier said than done, and so he spent all of 107 on a wild goose chase for Jugurtha. Even so, the people maintained their trust in Marius, and his command was extended for another year. Jugurtha had signed an alliance with King Bocchus of Mauritania, and the two kings were nearly able to ambush the Romans, but Marius survived the ambush, and afterwards crushed the Africans at the Second Battle of Cirta. Bocchus sued for peace shortly after, and now we can properly introduce the man who would one day rival Marius and march on Rome, the 31-year-old Lucius Cornelius Sulla. Despite being a member of the illustrious Cornelii, Sulla was born to a particularly down-on-its-luck branch, and so grew up among the Roman lower classes. He lived a hedonistic life of drinking and debauchery, while simultaneously furthering his studies and honing his fierce intelligence. Sulla was so poor that he could not afford to serve as an officer, so instead he avoided service altogether. Fortunately, Sulla's ambitions would get a convenient cash injection when one of his older lovers died and named him as her sole heir. Using this newfound money to bribe his way past service requirements, Sulla was elected quaestor. He was then attached to Marius' army and left for Numidia. His time in the bowels of Roman society was not entirely wasted, and he got on well with the soldiery of the Marian army and was soon revered as its best soldier. Sulla was also key in stopping the African ambush. Marius would need Sulla's charisma during peace negotiations, so he was selected to lead the peace talks with Mauritania, and very soon Sulla was on his way to finalise peace with Bocchus. Accompanied by King Bocchus' son to ensure safe passage, Sulla was able to walk straight past Jugurtha's army, since the Numidian did not wish to permanently alienate Bocchus. The tension was palpable, but Sulla safely arrived at Bocchus' court, and while the Mauritanian king publicly stated that he needed 10 days to mull over the agreement, he met with Sulla in secret, so Jugurtha would not find out, and told Sulla that Mauritania would not help the Numidians anymore. Sulla made one final request: Bocchus should forsake Jugurtha and hand him over to Rome. The next day, Bocchus told Jugurtha that he was going to accept peace with Rome, and invited him to an audience to see if he could sway Bocchus the other way. In desperation, Jugurtha offered vast swathes of Numidian territory, gold, and anything Bocchus could wish for. It must have been tempting for Bocchus, but Rome's overwhelming might convinced him otherwise. Bocchus rode to meet Jugurtha in a secluded area, before Mauritanian troops surrounded Jugurtha, butchered his guard, and threw the man in chains. Jugurtha's luck had run out. The war was over. Marius' victory in the war vindicated his ambition, and he would return to Rome in triumph, but it also served a far darker purpose. Many who opposed Marius whispered that it was Sulla that had really won the war, since he had captured Jugurtha. Marius was unamused by such prattlings, and it laid the foundations for Rome's most dangerous rivalry, a rivalry that would, in time, deal the Republic a fatal blow from which it would never recover. For now though, everyone's attention was drawn north as migrating hordes menaced Rome's northern border and annihilated consular armies, and the people of Rome knew of only one man who could save them now. But that is for next episode.